enhance the computing power of the 550 series intelligent quantum computers to meet the upcoming surge in demand for quantum computing power. Just as Lu Lang was preparing to announce the existence of the MP3000 medical bed to the outside world, Shirley unexpectedly called a halt to this action. What? Are you planning to create a big stir before the official announcement of the MP3000? Lu Lang felt somewhat confused. The reason he initially led the MP3000 medical bed project was precisely because of the urgent need for a significant research project to counter the space exploration initiative. The already launched heavy-lift rocket requires 7 to 8 months to reach the vicinity of Mars's outer space orbit. However, the Sky City project in the eastern country is also not progressing much. After 78 months, the massive scale of the project will likely only see the basic framework completed. With such a long project vacuum period, we can't just watch as a certain country boasts about its successful spacecraft launches, right? Sending out other ships to catch up with the spacecraft at this time would seem rather petty. Lu Lang has no interest in doing so. Instead, he has set his sights on the pharmaceutical industry, which the certain country has always been proud of. The pharmaceutical industry and the military-industrial complex are undoubtedly two major interest groups within that country. International giants like Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, Merck, and AbbVie have formed a vast alliance of interests, their influence second only to the renowned military-industrial complex. However, once the MP3000 medical bed is announced, the barriers that these pharmaceutical giants have built over decades through countless patents, biological research, and massive investments in medical devices will be ruthlessly shattered by Lu Lang. Their practices of profiting wildly from patents on a global scale will become history. The announcement of the MP3000 medical bed could have such enormous benefits that it might completely overturn the powerful collective interests of the pharmaceutical companies in that country. Lu Lang truly does not understand why Shirley wants to put a stop to it. Generally speaking, when you know that a favorable announcement is about to be made in an industry, the industry's prospects become even brighter. As an investor, what would you do? Listening to Shirley's slow words, Lu Lang answered without hesitation. Of course, I would rush to buy shares of the leading companies in that industry and wait for their value to rise. At this point, Lu Lang suddenly realized something. You mean? Exactly. It's somewhat similar to this principle. When you know that an industry is about to collapse, there are also methods for professional investors to profit from it. This involves short selling, betting on declines, and other specialized financial operations. I'm not entirely clear on the specifics, but the Strategic Command has already ordered a group of the most professional financial operators in the country to prepare to enter the market. This time, we not only want to watch the pharmaceutical industry in that country collapse and bleed, but we also want to charge in and fiercely tear into their flesh. Just as Western capitalists did to us over 20 years ago in the Hong Kong region, Shirley said bitterly. Over 20 years ago, during the time of Hong Kong's return, the region experienced the most terrifying financial crisis in history. Western financial giants attempted to exploit financial coercion to harvest the wealth accumulated in Hong Kong, one of the world's 3 major financial centers at that time. Fortunately, the authorities intervened and won this financial battle in the region. Even so, it caused enormous economic losses, and this grievance has been noted. Nowadays, this grudge is clearly attributed by Shirley to the interests of certain pharmaceutical enterprises. In his view, whether it was the financial giants from the West back then or today's pharmaceutical enterprises, they are all not to be trusted. Now, with the MP3000 medical bed, which has the potential to revolutionize the entire healthcare industry, how could one let this opportunity for revenge slip away? After hearing Shirley's rough action plan, even Lu Lang, who was used to seeing the world, couldn't help but feel a chill. Wow, I just wanted to see the interests of those pharmaceutical enterprises falter. But I didn't expect you all not only to send it off yourself, but also to completely wipe it out and scatter its ashes afterward. The country's authorities are mobilizing national resources to prepare for the impending collapse of the pharmaceutical sector. In this situation, Lu Lang couldn't imagine any possibility for those enterprises to survive. Such ruthless tactics, I really like it. Moreover, this action is not purely about revenge. The profits from targeting those pharmaceutical interests will be used to subsidize the necessary official funding for reforms in the domestic healthcare industry. This can also be seen as utilizing the money from the pharmaceutical sector to transform our entire domestic healthcare system. It's a form of resourceful utilization, right? Hearing this, Lu Lang became quite interested. He was very intrigued by such self-serving actions at the national level. So how can I assist? It doesn't need to be complicated. We just need to postpone the announcement date of the MP3000 medical bed to the outside world, according to the current pace of the official arrangements. It would only take about a month at most. Lu Lang agreed without hesitation. After waiting for 20 days, Lu Lang finally received news from Shirley. The MP3000 medical bed was officially announced to the public. Chapter 365. If the problem cannot be solved, just eliminate the one who raised it. When the official press conference announced that a new medical bed device invented by the National Strategic Equipment Research Institute had officially been developed, the reaction worldwide, including that of most domestic media, was one of complete bewilderment. What is this? A medical bed? Is it necessary to use national-level publicity to declare its existence? How impressive can a medical bed really be? Are the people in the National Strategic Equipment Research Institute just getting in through connections? Otherwise, why would they promote a medical bed as if it were a treasure? In previous national-level press conferences, what was usually promoted? Space elevators, navigator space stations, lunar outpost bases, the sixth-generation unmanned combat aircraft, electromagnetic cannon technology. At the very least, there were military and police robots that shone during the Mogadishu hostage rescue operation. To be honest, having a medical bed device among other equipment simply lowers the overall prestige and quality of the technology. Just as both domestic and foreign media are puzzled about why the national authorities would do such a thing. More detailed information about this medical bed has been revealed through an official announcement. It claims to be able to treat all known human ailments. If this statement had come from some amateur scientist, an unknown wild medical scholar who has never published any relevant academic papers in the medical field, or from an informal academic institution, the media in various countries might have just chuckled and not paid it much attention. However, this news was announced at an official press conference, leaving the media organizations that heard it in disbelief, as if they were experiencing auditory hallucinations. The idea of treating all known human ailments is something that even those not in the medical industry can understand the implications of. This suggests that doctors and pharmaceuticals around the world would face unemployment and obsolescence. It means that humanity would no longer suffer from various complex medical issues. But is this truly possible? As the most authoritative and serious spokesperson for the national government, the accuracy of its announcements is undoubtedly reliable. In other words, the news released from this platform is backed by national power. Additionally, historically, the national authorities have never had a habit of fabricating news. Considering the remarkable advancements in space technology and military equipment in recent years, the media worldwide is now pondering whether this could actually be true. I understand your current tension and anxiety, but to speak frankly, the development of medical technology is not something that can be leapfrogged like space technology. The nation has created a space elevator, which logically facilitates the construction of their space station and lunar base. One could say that the space elevator is a key technology that has allowed them to surpass others in space technology. However, in the medical field, there is no equivalent technology like a space elevator that allows for shortcuts. Simply put, there are over 100 types of cancer worldwide, each affecting various organs and systems in the human body. Every type of cancer represents a daunting peak that remains unconquered by current medical science. And now, they claim to have solved all these cancers. As the leader of a major pharmaceutical company, can you truly believe this is possible? Inside the headquarters of a prominent pharmaceutical group, the chairman and CEO is anxiously listening to the group's most authoritative medical expert explain the situation. This slightly balding expert also serves as the chief medical advisor of the company, a tenured professor at a prestigious medical school, and an honorary vice dean at several well-known medical institutions in Europe and America. There is even the possibility of having a column in the world's top medical journal, which is considered an authoritative medical relic in the Western medical community. A major pharmaceutical company invests nearly $100 million annually to hire experts for their forward-looking and authoritative advice during critical times. The recent announcement from the national authorities regarding medical beds has sent shockwaves through the pharmaceutical industry, not just within the country, but globally. Shortly after the news was released, pharmaceutical stocks in major financial markets experienced significant declines. Among these, the prominent pharmaceutical company saw its stock price drop by 7 on the first day, triggering a market halt. The loss of over $100 billion in the stock market is not particularly alarming for a company with a history of over 170 years. The current leader is now concerned that the functionality of these medical beds might indeed be as alarming as reported. If they can truly treat all known human diseases, it would undoubtedly deal an unprecedented blow to any pharmaceutical company. In comparison, financial crises would seem trivial. When humanity no longer needs medication, all pharmaceutical companies will face dire consequences. If this medical bed were invented by an ordinary institution or a common medical scholar, the leader would have countless ways to make that individual disappear without a trace. Despite the company's market value being just over $200 billion, which is significantly lower than many renowned tech companies, its nearly 200-year history has allowed it to weave an intricate web of influence in both politics and economics. Offending companies like Google, Twitter, or Apple might lead to a court summons, with bankruptcy being the worst-case scenario. However, truly crossing the military-industrial complex or the pharmaceutical interest groups would invite a range of dark and gray methods beyond the law. There was once a renowned medical expert who developed a special drug for a certain type of cancer, which proved to be equally effective, if not more so, than a cancer-targeting drug developed by the company at a cost of several $100 million. When the company sought to acquire the patent for this drug, they were refused. A month later, this well-known expert, who had won swimming medals in school, was found drowned in a shallow pool. The coroner ruled it an accident, and the case was quickly closed by the authorities. Aside from the expert's family, this incident did not cause any stir on social media. To be honest, the leader prefers this straightforward approach to problem solving. If a problem cannot be resolved, eliminate the source of the problem directly. But now the issue is that this medical bed technology is backed by a nation, a major power among the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, possessing nuclear weapons and significant political, economic, and military strength. Chapter 366. Malicious short selling. Just thinking about this made the head of Pfizer, Albert, feel a headache coming on. His fingers, holding the cigar, trembled unconsciously due to his anxious mood. Immediately after the official announcement from the Dragon Country, Pfizer Group joined forces with several major pharmaceutical companies and leveraged connections to exert pressure on the relevant authorities. They repeatedly emphasized that the statement made by the representatives of the Dragon Country constituted a severe government interference in market behavior. However, while the authorities verbally agreed, they merely expressed doubts about the Dragon Country's news announcement without taking immediate substantial action. Clearly, not only the Western medical community, but even the authorities believed that the representatives of the Dragon Country were exaggerating. So, do you think these representatives of the Dragon Country are just bluffing? Albert asked, staring intently into the eyes of the chief medical consultant of the group. Given the current situation, it's highly probable, the consultant replied. Perhaps the representatives of the Dragon Country do have some insights into certain challenging medical conditions plaguing the medical community today, but the number of solvable issues certainly would not be as many as they claim. Your family has controlled Pfizer for over a century, and I have been in the medical field for nearly half a century. From any perspective, the efficacy of this medical bed is hard to justify. Listening to the sensible explanation from the chief medical consultant, Albert's furrowed brow finally relaxed a bit. At that moment, Albert's confidential secretary knocked and entered the room. Boss, we've traced the source of the funds behind the recent malicious short selling of the company's stock. Hearing this news, Albert's spirit was jolted. Not long ago, a wave of international speculative funds began to enter the financial market, maliciously short-selling Pfizer's stock value. Initially, Albert regarded these individuals as crazies. After all, Pfizer had become a leader among international pharmaceutical companies, thanks to its numerous medical patents. In this world, medical drugs are as crucial as food and water. While the authorities might face bankruptcy, Pfizer, as a leading global pharmaceutical company, could never go under. With this mindset, Albert and other members of the pharmaceutical interest group watched the situation unfold, expecting these international speculators to suffer significant losses in the stock market. However, following a news announcement from the representatives of the Dragon Country, the entire event spiraled beyond the control of Albert and his colleagues. Is it the Dragon Country? No. We found out that the source of those international speculative funds is Gabon. Gabon. Albert was taken aback upon hearing the name of this country. If it weren't for being the site of a space elevator, probably 99% of the world wouldn't even know it existed. Initially suspecting that the international speculators were backed by the Dragon Country, as they would be the biggest beneficiaries, Albert was surprised to learn that Gabon was now tightly bound to various alliances, with its military forces entirely converted into police forces. The country's foreign defense has been completely handed over to the local station forces. Moreover, the current leadership within the alliance is firmly held by a certain nation. Boss, those targeting us are most likely from this nation. This is undoubtedly the situation that certain pharmaceutical companies are least willing to see. They are up against a country, a permanent member of the Security Council with nuclear capabilities. The gray and black tactics they once used with ease have suddenly lost their significance. This is clearly an action against certain entities, with the pharmaceutical companies merely suffering from collateral damage. Now, the only thing they can do is hope that the appetite of the opposing nation isn't too big. Losing a few $100 billion in the stock market is something they could accept. They just hope this is a rogue extortion incident backed by the credibility of the opposing nation, convincing the world that they truly possess a miraculous medical bed. This would lead to a setback for pharmaceutical companies globally in the financial market. In this way, the prepared individuals from that nation could reap significant benefits worldwide. For over 100 years, this leading pharmaceutical company has engaged in various gray and black tactics for commercial competition. However, when faced with a malicious competitor supported by state power, they can only be left dumbfounded. The opponent is using national strength against them. Even though they are a leader among international pharmaceutical companies, they can only watch in this situation, unless the relevant authorities are willing to invest in market rescue. But right now, they are trying to allocate 13. $5 billion for a space mission that is crucial to national interests, requiring significant lobbying and various exchanges of interests. It seems likely that only when the domestic pharmaceutical industry faces a critical moment could there be a determination to intervene and allocate funds for market rescue. Until then, they can only endure on their own. If they get through, it will be seen as a costly lesson. If they can't, bankruptcy is the only outcome. The only comfort they find is that, as the leader in the pharmaceutical industry, they are sure to outlast smaller companies in this war of endurance and resources. Thus, the next day arrived, with more media and official institutions questioning the powerful claims made by a certain nation regarding the medical bed. It finally released detailed human trial data, showcasing what can be described as miraculous treatment on death row inmates. The detailed video footage and data, once published, immediately stirred a global uproar. When witnessing the video footage of the criminal who had suffered a fatal injury being miraculously revived, the stock prices and market values of several world-renowned pharmaceutical companies plummeted dramatically. Within just 1 minute, the market dropped by 7, triggering a first-level circuit breaker, leading to a 15-minute trading halt. After 15 minutes, the market fell again by 13, activating a second-level circuit breaker, resulting in another 15-minute pause in trading. Following this, it was no surprise that it dropped by 20 once more, ultimately leading to a complete market shutdown. The expressions on the faces of leaders from various pharmaceutical companies were as bleak as the stock market itself. The international investors, whose connections and backgrounds with certain regions were unclear, had likely profited significantly from this malicious short-selling attack on the pharmaceutical sector. At this moment, the focus of the pharmaceutical leaders had shifted. They knew that if this continued, just a few more trading days like this could spell disaster not only for companies like Pfizer, but for the entire pharmaceutical industry. A century-old company could be destroyed in an instant. On the day of the incident, before the trading day had ended, major financial trading centers announced technical difficulties, necessitating a pause in operations for adjustments. The panic was palpable not only among pharmaceutical companies, but also within the government, which was alarmed by the drastic decline in the stock market. The healthcare expenditure in that region accounted for an astonishing 17% of GDP, making the importance of pharmaceutical giants like Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson undeniable. If these companies could not weather the crisis, smaller pharmaceutical firms would surely collapse like a house of cards. The collapse of an industry contributing 17% to GDP would severely impact an already struggling economy, leading to unprecedented turmoil, far more terrifying than the financial crisis of 2008. This region would experience the catastrophic effects of this superstorm before any other country. Consequently, the government resorted to administrative measures, issuing mandatory orders to halt stock trading at several financial centers. This intervention temporarily stopped the relentless decline of the pharmaceutical sector, but everyone understood it was merely a superficial remedy, a futile attempt to cover up the underlying issues. Increasingly frustrated investors gathered outside the stock exchange and government buildings, protesting the suspension of trading. These were individuals who had invested in pharmaceutical stocks, which had historically been considered stable investments akin to gold. Yet, who could have imagined that a single news story could put these century-old pharmaceutical giants at risk of bankruptcy? The gathered protesters are becoming increasingly agitated, with some even starting to clash with the police on duty. As the scale of physical confrontations continues to escalate, more and more officers are dispatched to suppress the violent demonstrations. Tear gas, riot shields, rubber batons, stones on the street, paint cans turned into flamethrowers, homemade Molotov cocktails. The opposition between the two sides is growing more severe. Through the glass, watching the scene unfold from a distance, the big boss's expression is as dark as water. The successful launch of the rocket for the Mars journey project hasn't brought him much joy before he is faced with a crisis in the pharmaceutical industry, which adds to his frustration. These fools, don't they realize this is for their own good? Even if trading were to be reopened, which idiot would want to pick up the already collapsed pharmaceutical stocks? The big boss shows no signs of hiding his deep-seated disdain for the distant protesters. The pharmaceutical sector is currently in a complete crash, with market value and stock prices plummeting. Those holding pharmaceutical company stocks are frantically trying to sell them off to minimize their losses. However, someone needs to take over the stocks for them to stop the loss. Otherwise, they can only watch their pharmaceutical stocks become increasingly worthless, bit by bit. Suspending stock market trading is, to some extent, a form of protection for them. Once trading resumes, with the speed of the pharmaceutical sector's collapse, the stocks in the hands of these individuals will quickly turn into worthless scraps of paper. What to do? This is the primary concern troubling the big boss. This situation is nothing like the previous losses faced by companies in the space sector during the competition with another country. Even though they have indeed fallen behind in space exploration, it was merely a matter of losing face, a slight dip in their invisible international status. Beyond that, there were no significant material losses. But this time is different. The pharmaceutical industry accounts for 17% of their GDP. If left unattended, it would result in not just a severe loss, but catastrophic consequences. The big boss can only urgently summon representatives from major pharmaceutical companies to meet, hoping to quickly find a solution. On the other hand, officials from the other country are in a semi-recovery mode regarding this crisis in the pharmaceutical industry. A representative has come to report good news. The pharmaceutical industry of the other country is finally going to be thoroughly crippled. Don't be fooled by their current stabilization of the situation through trading suspension. As soon as they dare to reopen the stock market, trillions of dollars will evaporate in an instant, the representative excitedly remarks. However, it is somewhat regrettable that after the forced suspension of trading, the profits made in their stock market cannot be withdrawn for the time being. How much did this operation earn? Conservatively estimated, it exceeds 1 trillion. Hiss. After hearing Shirley's words, Lu Lang couldn't help but take a deep breath. It's known that the overall GDP of the domestic pharmaceutical industry in a certain country is only around several trillion. The malicious short-selling behavior by the official entities of another country has earned 1 trillion, which is almost equivalent to dismantling the entire pharmaceutical industry and squeezing out all its remaining value. Just think about the strategic national project Sky City, which has a budget of only 500 billion. This malicious short-selling has directly made back enough to cover the budgets of 2 Sky City projects. How could Lu Lang not be shocked? However, it's impossible for the official entities of that country to just sit back and watch us transfer these gains. The scale and amount are too large, and the entire pharmaceutical industry is on the verge of collapse. If I were in the position of the officials of that country, I might just go all out and announce a halt to the stock market, confiscating all overseas funds related to the pharmaceutical industry to cover the losses. If the amount were smaller, say tens of billions, they might not risk their credibility to openly disrupt trading rules. But this is over 1 trillion. No matter what methods the official entities use, the flow of such massive funds will definitely be noticed. No institution, organization, or even country has been able to launder such a large amount in one go. When the officials realize that the culprit behind the collapse of the domestic pharmaceutical industry has profited 1 trillion from this crisis, and then audaciously attempts to transfer that money out, it's highly likely they will completely tear up any pretense and confiscate the funds to cover the losses, disregarding their credibility. So, have we just wasted our efforts? Lu Lang frowned and asked. Chapter 368. Harming others for self-gain. There's no way out unless the pharmaceutical industry of that country has a chance to survive. Otherwise, the officials will definitely go all out. If 17 trillion suddenly disappears, anyone would panic. Although we might indeed have wasted our efforts in the end, I think it's quite good as long as it can annoy them. Shirley wasn't too discouraged. Despite the possibility that the 1 trillion earned from the crisis in the pharmaceutical industry might not be recoverable, but as long as it causes substantial harm to them, he felt that it was enough. Is there a way to both annoy them and get back that 1 trillion? That's $1 trillion. Nearly 7 trillion in local currency. We could build 2 Sky City projects with that. Adding up the costs of nuclear fusion reactor, space elevator, and Sky City, these 3 projects probably wouldn't even reach 1 trillion in expenses. Just thinking about not being able to recover such a large sum made Lu Lang feel a pang of regret. Who wouldn't he feel that way? $1 trillion. How appealing it is. If it were allocated to the army. Sigh. I wish it were possible, unless the pharmaceutical industry of that country can survive this crisis. However, we have been too harsh on the situation, and this time it is highly likely that the pharmaceutical industry there will be completely wiped out. If we must place blame, it's on the heavy-handed approach taken, which has left them in a state of confusion. Listening to the murmurs from Shirley, Lu Lang couldn't help but roll his eyes. By the way, do you remember the 3-step phase mentioned earlier? Lu Lang suddenly recalled something. 3-step phase? Are you referring to the 3 phases of the widespread adoption of medical beds? Exactly. The first phase is constrained by the computing power of the 550C intelligent quantum computer, meaning that medical beds cannot be applied on a large scale. Therefore, during this phase, medical beds can only serve particularly challenging conditions such as cancer, ALS, and limb restoration. The number of people served is also quite limited, which is why it was stipulated that each citizen can only receive treatment once. Once there is a breakthrough in the computing power of the 550 series intelligent quantum computers, services for medical beds can then expand to the second and third phases. This will take some time, and before we reach the third phase, where the services can comprehensively cover the vast population of 1 billion citizens, the global medical industry will still hold significance. Before the medical bed services are fully popularized, most citizens will still have to face their own medical issues. After all, one cannot expect to use medical beds for common ailments like colds and fevers, as that would be a significant waste of the precious resources and efficacy of these beds. After hearing Lu Lang's explanation, Shirley finally understood. The emergence of medical beds has undoubtedly pronounced a death sentence for the pharmaceutical industry. However, The speed at which medical beds are adopted will largely determine how quickly the death sentence for the current global pharmaceutical industry is executed. If news spreads that medical beds cannot be widely adopted in a short period, it would undoubtedly be good news for the pharmaceutical industry, allowing it to shift from immediate execution to a stay of execution. At that time, seeing a glimmer of hope for the survival of their pharmaceutical industry, they would certainly not just give up. After all, abandoning national credibility and forcibly intervening in the market, confiscating foreign capital, is a double-edged sword for them. Therefore, that trillion-dollar investment is likely to be recoverable. Once the profits are reclaimed, they will be completely at our mercy. The speed of our medical beds adoption will determine the life and death of the pharmaceutical industry there and even globally. What to do next will depend on the strategic decisions made by the relevant authorities. Listening to Lu Lang, Shirley's eyes grew brighter. If this can not only keep them in check but also bring trillions of dollars in benefits to the country, he would naturally be in favor. After all, what is more appealing than benefiting oneself while causing harm to others? Wow, educated high-level intellectuals are truly different. Quite insidious. I like it. Shirley excitedly praised Lu Lang and then hurriedly left. He needed to quickly report to the strategic department and discuss the feasibility of this operation with the think tank of the Strategic Advisory Office. Damn. Is being insidious a compliment? Across the ocean, a certain big boss is meeting with leaders from major pharmaceutical companies to discuss how to save the dire situation currently facing the pharmaceutical industry. However, after a long discussion, the big boss only makes empty promises that the official side will take responsibility. When asked about specific measures, he always avoids the topic, completely ignoring the most anticipated actions like increasing currency supply or allocating funds for market rescue. The collapse of the pharmaceutical industry seems almost inevitable at this point. The big boss would never pour rescue funds into this bottomless pit. It would only exacerbate the losses. We have always believed in the regulating role of the free market. When he started talking about the free market and the 2008 financial crisis, the faces of the pharmaceutical leaders in attendance changed simultaneously. They sensed a dangerous atmosphere. This old man was likely preparing to abandon them, just as they were about to confront the big boss, warning him of the terrifying destructive power that the pharmaceutical industry as coalition could unleash if the industry failed. The big boss's administrative secretary rushed into the meeting room to deliver an urgent message. After hearing the message, the big boss paused for a moment before addressing everyone present. Gentlemen, we have received news from the officials of a certain country regarding an upcoming high-level diplomatic meeting. If there is any good news, I will certainly inform you. With that, he stood up and left, leaving the pharmaceutical leaders in a state of anxiety, anger, and grim speculation. At this point, everyone knew that this crisis in the pharmaceutical industry was closely related to the officials of that certain country. Not long after, the big boss, equally anxious, welcomed a foreign affairs commissioner from that country, who had come specifically to address the pharmaceutical crisis. We have received a request from the official representatives of one of our allied countries, hoping your side can guarantee the safety of their investments in your stock market. Upon hearing this opening line, the big boss nearly fainted from anger. Isn't this just a blatant provocation? The semi-suspended state of the domestic stock market is directly caused by the announcement of a certain country's medical bed. Moreover, this news was officially released through authoritative channels, further accelerating the collapse of the global pharmaceutical industry. As one of the largest and most powerful pharmaceutical giants globally, this country has undoubtedly suffered the most during this turmoil. It is no longer just a regional crisis in the pharmaceutical industry. Before long, perhaps next week or even tomorrow, it will spread worldwide. I believe that the people of this nation will also be deeply affected. As the two largest economies in the world, I hope you are here to help us tackle this challenge together. However, if you are here to gloat, then I cannot entertain you. The big boss, suppressing his anger, replied solemnly. If the counterpart were a foreign affairs commissioner from a certain African nation, the big boss feared he might lose control and confront them physically. How could they dare come before me, having undermined a pillar industry and profited from it, now claiming they want to safely transfer these funds? These damned individuals from that nation know full well that I am aware of the true culprits behind this, which are themselves. Yet they pretend not to know, shifting the blame to a small African country that ranks barely above the international radar. With a literacy rate exceeding 90, this nation lacks even a decent university, let alone a financial industry. Their industrial sector is virtually non-existent. In a place like this, how can they claim that this small country is stirring up trouble in the stock market and maliciously shorting the pharmaceutical industry, costing us billions? The big boss was furious not only because they were the masterminds, but also due to the pathetic excuse they provided to cover their tracks, treating him as if he were a fool. Despite this, the big boss managed to suppress his anger as much as possible and refrained from making any definitive statements. At present, The only ones capable of lending a hand to this country and providing hope for its crumbling pharmaceutical sector are the representatives from that nation. This is a sector worth 17% of GDP. Even if there is a sliver of hope to save it, the big boss must try. The two foreign affairs representatives exchanged glances and raised their eyebrows. They had initially provoked the big boss to gauge the current official stance. It seemed that this collapse had thoroughly shattered their pride, leaving only a fragment of dignity. After testing the waters, they finally began to address the main issue. Please rest assured, we are also victims in this situation. We are here with a spirit of seeking common ground while reserving differences, aiming to jointly resolve this issue. No one expected that the announcement of a new medical technology device would have such a profound impact on the global pharmaceutical industry. Listening to their words, the big boss felt a twitch at the corner of his eye. The shamelessness of these representatives truly knew no bounds. As the developers of the medical beds, how could they have the audacity to claim victimhood? Indeed, the pharmaceutical sector in their country is substantial, and the emergence of the medical beds has indeed impacted their industry. As the country that invented medical beds, global investors are filled with confidence in this nation. Just this one medical bed can completely compensate for all the losses in the healthcare sector here. Moreover, based on the past performance of the official authorities, they will definitely not sit idly by while the domestic pharmaceutical industry collapses. Therefore, the investment market is optimistic about the healthcare sector within the country. After the announcement of the medical bed, although the domestic pharmaceutical industry's performance in the financial market experienced some fluctuations, it remained within an acceptable range. Compared to the dramatic downturn experienced by traditional strongholds in the pharmaceutical industry in certain Western countries, the performance of the healthcare sector here can be described as calm and steady. Once the topic was introduced, the two special diplomatic envoys quickly expressed their intentions. Essentially, they stated that this nation could assist by alleviating global investors' panic regarding the pharmaceutical industry through various means. This way, the pharmaceutical sector, which was already on the brink of collapse, might still have a chance to struggle for survival. However, the prerequisite is that the official authorities must adhere to the spirit of the contract and the trading principles of the international financial market, allowing the safe transfer of the trillion-dollar earnings from their financial market abroad. This might be the only lifeline available to help the pharmaceutical industry here avoid collapse. The chief executive, with a serious expression, pondered for nearly 10 minutes with his aides before agreeing, but he put forth a condition. He hoped that the other party could first take measures to stabilize the market. If successful, they would ensure that the earnings would be promptly handed over for processing. Upon hearing this response, the two special envoys furrowed their brows. The idea of goods before payment? What does if effective mean? The effectiveness cannot be quantified. What if the authorities later claimed that there was no effect, or that the results were unsatisfactory? This money was intended to support the reform and transformation of the domestic pharmaceutical industry and was already viewed as secured by the official authorities. How could they allow any chance for the other party to backtrack on it? After several rounds of negotiation, the chief executive firmly insisted on the need for goods before payment. The two special envoys couldn't help but feel frustrated. Who is actually seeking whom's assistance here? Your pharmaceutical industry is on the verge of death, yet you still maintain such a high-handed attitude. If there is no sincerity on your part, then I see no reason to continue this cooperation. We will devote all our efforts to accelerate the popularization of the medical bed. I hope you can use that $1 trillion to provide a satisfactory answer to the pharmaceutical enterprises and shareholders here. Seeing the sudden change in the expression of the foreign envoy, the chief executive felt a pang of unease. The words from the other party were not just verbal threats. They were serious and actionable. Two special diplomatic envoys from a certain country stood up and turned to leave. The big boss across the table suddenly turned pale. Just as the representatives from that country were leaving, the local pharmaceutical industry was indeed facing a grave situation. Wait a moment, please wait. The big boss exclaimed. I believe we can still agree on the terms we discussed earlier. He hurriedly got up to chase after them, almost tripping over the table leg in his anxious state. Chapter 370. Gratitude. A certain country immediately agreed to unconditionally pay $500 billion, half of the revenue funds from its financial market, to the other party, signing the agreement on-site for immediate execution. The remaining $500 billion would be transferred after the other party took official action. However, this second tranche of over $500 billion could only be used within the borders of that country. In simple terms, this money could be used to acquire companies and enterprises within its territory and to purchase bonds, stocks, and funds. The only requirement was that the second tranche of funds must be utilized domestically. Compared to earlier, the big boss's offer and attitude showed considerable sincerity. After all, there was no strong capital backing, and the survival of the domestic pillar industry, the healthcare sector, was in the hands of the representatives from that country. This offer could be seen as a gamble of $500 billion on the possibility of reviving the pharmaceutical industry. As for the remaining funds, it was merely the big boss's final stubbornness. Using over 500 billion domestically could slightly reduce the impact on the local financial market. If over $1 trillion were to leave the country, it would not only affect the pharmaceutical industry, but could also severely damage the financial market. Upon hearing the big boss's sensible offer, which finally showed sincerity, the two special envoys exchanged glances and returned to the negotiation table. The strategic directive given to them was that they must secure at least half of that $1 trillion fund. Only then could the millions of industry workers affected by the healthcare sector receive proper restructuring and placement. After confirming the basic terms of the transaction, a small-scale supplementary negotiation based on the aforementioned conditions continued between both parties. 3 hours later, the negotiations finally concluded, and both sides signed the relevant agreements to ensure the next steps could proceed. The big boss kept his word. Under his executive order, several major financial transaction centers, which had been in a standstill, temporarily reopened trading permissions for this transaction, transferring $500 billion to the other party. When the news of the fund transfer reached the ears of the two special envoys, the transaction was preliminarily considered successful. The representative from the local government expressed gratitude to the other side for their adherence to the spirit of international trade agreements. Watching the representatives from that country stand up with smiles and shake hands with him, the big boss couldn't stop the twitching at the corners of his eyes. Damn it. Even now, they're still pretending to be third parties. He felt like cursing at them, but on the surface, the big boss had to force a smile and shake hands with the other party enthusiastically. He was still counting on these representatives to help find a way out for the domestic pharmaceutical sector. After a lengthy negotiation, the big boss was exhausted. Every little tug with the representatives was tied to billions of dollars in funding. This left him mentally and physically drained, and even though the negotiation was over, he was far from being able to rest. Boss, those representatives from the pharmaceutical industry are still waiting for your response. Compared to the representatives and officials from the other country, the ones most concerned about this negotiation were the domestic pharmaceutical industry stakeholders. For the representatives, losing the negotiation meant just missing out on some profits, a missed opportunity. But for the domestic stakeholders, losing meant losing everything. Business tycoons with fortunes in the billions anxiously waited in the conference room. Cigars were lit one after another to ease their nervousness. Thick smoke filled the room, and even opening the windows couldn't clear it. The door to the conference room opened, and the big boss appeared before everyone. At that moment, all the heads of pharmaceutical companies present couldn't help but stand up, hoping the big boss would bring good news. Through my efforts, the representatives agreed to take some remedial actions for their reckless behavior. Of course, we also had to pay some price. The big boss began to elaborate on his indelible contributions to the negotiation. Before he could finish, his secretary came in with a message, stating that the officials had important information to announce globally. The large screen in the conference room was quickly turned on. Serious statement. Due to technical difficulties, industrial mass production factors, medical beds cannot be applied on a large scale at this stage. In the future, the country will remain in the first phase of medical bed application for a long time. In this first phase, all citizens can receive treatment for one major illness, including limb restoration, cancer, congenital genetic diseases, and other difficult conditions, with their ID. Moreover, during this phase, all medical institutions across the country will undergo restructuring. Citizens and relevant industry personnel need not panic. The officials will properly handle all affected enterprises and staff. Upon hearing the official spokesperson's words translated simultaneously on the screen, the anxious heads of pharmaceutical companies could finally feel a bit more at ease. I knew it. The medical beds from that country are just laboratory products. If they really want to popularize them, it will take at least 30 to 50 years to get it done. So, at this stage, we still can't do without our pharmaceutical companies. Otherwise, those who are sick will have to wait for the medical beds to be popularized, and will end up waiting to die, right? Moreover, it seems like their intention is to serve only their own citizens and not open it to foreigners, which is quite a significant piece of news. Even if they do become widely available in the future, they will definitely prioritize supplying countries within their alliance. Given the opposing relationship between us and the alliance, there's really no need for the impoverished folks here to panic. This medical bed has nothing to do with them at all. Exactly. Thanks to them for clarifying this in a timely manner, we finally have hope. Damn it. Why are you grateful to those people? Have you forgotten that this issue was raised by them in the first place? The conference room instantly turned chaotic, filled with various remarks from the pharmaceutical industry leaders who had survived the ordeal. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Lu Lang also learned about the latest developments from Shirley. What? The officials have over $500 billion in that country and are worried about which companies to acquire? Chapter 371. Acquiring the film industry. After the official announcement regarding the medical beds was released, the impact on the global pharmaceutical industry in the financial markets was evident. The initial announcement of the medical beds could be described as a panic-inducing piece of news worldwide. Even strong pharmaceutical giants like Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson, no matter how glorious their past, saw their stock prices and market values plummet with the emergence of these beds. This was not only the case in that country. In other financial markets outside of it, the performance of pharmaceutical companies was dismal. A halving in market value became a common occurrence, prompting officials from various countries to take the criticized emergency measure of halting trading to curb the collapse of the pharmaceutical industry. However, with the clarification from the officials regarding the first phase of the medical beds popularization, professionals in the global pharmaceutical sector could finally breathe a sigh of relief. According to the announcement, due to current technological limitations, they simply cannot achieve large-scale distribution of such miraculous medical devices. Even if the day comes when they can be popularized, the officials have stated that priority will be given to their own citizens. In simple terms, countries outside of that region will not have access to this service at all. As a result of this statement, financial markets around the world began to return to normal trading. After the frantic sell-off before the trading halt, investors finally started to buy stocks in the pharmaceutical industry at bargain prices. After a week, many pharmaceutical giants, including Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson, faced the largest losses in their history. Their stock prices and market values shrank by more than half, but in the end, they were fortunate enough to survive. Unlike many small and medium-sized pharmaceutical companies that went bankrupt and liquidated, the pharmaceutical industry, which originally accounted for as much as 17% of GDP, has shrunk to less than 5% in just a week, a shocking decline. However, this is still a small blessing in disguise. The pharmaceutical sector, even at 5% of GDP, can still provide a large number of jobs, preventing a new wave of unemployment that could reach millions. The local authorities have taken measures as per the agreements, and the main stakeholders are also expected to release the second batch of funds, which amounts to over $500 billion. This substantial special fund can only be used for acquisitions of bonds, funds, stocks, and enterprises within the country. However, how to spend this over $500 billion is indeed a big issue. The national bonds here are not worth considering. They are essentially a trap, and we cannot afford to invest money in them. If we were to buy them, it would be akin to throwing money into a bottomless pit. Related financial products like funds and stocks are also traps, considering the focus on financial industry development here in recent years. If we invest in these financial products, there is a risk of being taken advantage of. Therefore, after comprehensive consideration, the focus must be on the real economy. Listening quietly to the introduction. When it comes to the real economy, the most valuable assets here are undoubtedly the military manufacturing enterprises. But I believe you know that military enterprises are the lifeblood here and will never be allowed to be acquired by outsiders. Upon hearing this, I nodded. After all, which sovereign country in the world would tolerate foreign influence in its military enterprises? Besides military enterprises, another highly valuable sector is high-tech companies, such as major players in the technology field. However, these high-tech firms have extremely high market values, and their major shareholders come from all over the world. Even with official assistance, forcibly acquiring them would require significant premiums. If controlling stakes cannot be obtained, there is no real need for acquisition from a national perspective. In conclusion, it's not worth the effort. The representative high-tech companies mentioned have market values in the trillions, with over $500 billion. Attempting to acquire controlling stakes through premiums is simply impossible. Among high-tech companies, large enterprises are hard to acquire, while smaller ones are not appealing to the local authorities. Hence, the strategic department is troubled by how to spend this over $500 billion. The purpose of this visit is also to hear Lu Lang's opinion, as he is the main contributor to the country securing $1 trillion from here. As for the other manufacturing sectors, they are not worth mentioning. None are competitive. Since the shift to a financial and technological national policy, manufacturing has all moved to third-world countries. The domestic manufacturing system has been completely outclassed, with no acquisition value at all. After listening to the discussion, Lu Lang began to ponder. One must find an industry where investing over $500 billion can provide us with a significant competitive advantage. After some contemplation, Lu Lang continued. Have you considered the cultural industry? The cultural industry? What do you mean? For instance, the film industry in a certain country, with its 6 major film companies, commonly referred to as the Hollywood giants. Under their influence, Hollywood's works are marketed globally, enjoying immense popularity and impact worldwide. However, the average market value of each film giant is only a few $100 billion. Even with a premium acquisition, over $500 billion would be enough to acquire them all. This way, we would possess the most advanced film industrial system from that region. This is also a necessary condition for resisting external cultural infiltration and for cultural export to various countries. Lu Lang's words left Shirley in deep thought. This was indeed an aspect he had never considered. In recent years, with the application of high-tech achievements such as space elevators, navigation space stations, lunar bases, and advanced nuclear fusion reactors, the actual national strength of the Dragon Nation has experienced explosive growth. However, Regrettably, compared to infrastructure and tangible industries, the development in the field of spiritual culture has lagged behind. Relying solely on the films produced by Liu Lang cannot change the weak state of cultural export from the Dragon Nation. Domestic protective measures for local films still exist, and in popular dramas, romance films disguised under various genres cannot effectively export culture. Films like The Wandering Earth, which can showcase the national industrial and technological achievements and promote national strength, are rare, with no one besides Liu Lang capable of producing such works. Ultimately, the weakness of the modern film industry in the Dragon Nation fails to match its robust national power. As for the importance of cultural promotion, this is vividly reflected in the example of a certain country. After World War II, it managed to defeat its rival and become a global leader for an extended period. Apart from its unparalleled military strength, a significant part of this success can be attributed to its cultural promotion led by Hollywood. In various genres such as science fiction, war, and action films, its military and equipment are portrayed as the dominant force on Earth, instilling awe in people worldwide. In romance and urban fashion dramas, the lives of ordinary citizens from that country are showcased to global audiences, making people from third-world nations envious. This is how the term beacon of hope came about. Through historical and period dramas, it also manages to whitewash its colonial past, leveraging Hollywood's powerful film industry to market globally, creating a strong cultural influence. It can be said that Hollywood is an extension of that country's strength on a cultural level. Through Hollywood films, it has long engaged in cultural infiltration across the globe. Recognizing the importance of the cultural industry in national competition, the Dragon Nation has begun to vigorously support the development of its film industry. However, those so-called famous directors in the country have no intention of developing industrialized film production. They are solely focused on historical dramas, romantic films, comedies, and cannot grasp the strategic intentions behind it. In the domestic film industry, many people equate industrialization with grand scenes. They are satisfied with merely finding more extras and creating a plethora of props. The suggestion put forth by Liu Lang might just be a good idea. Acquiring a major film industry from abroad, leveraging the industrialized film production capabilities of leading enterprises to create a catalytic effect that would force the domestic film industry to upgrade significantly. In the past, the domestic film industry often attributed problems to systemic issues, national circumstances, or the overwhelming strength of foreign industries. Now, with the direct acquisition of major foreign film enterprises, the technology of industrialized film production can be shared with the local film industry at any time. Additionally, by eliminating the domestic film protection month, the local industry would be compelled to learn from the advanced practices abroad, accelerating the upgrade of the cultural industry. What? You say the sky will fall without the protection month for local films, and they won't survive? That's your problem. The protective period for local films should come to an end. They can't always rely on official protection to survive in their comfort zone. This will never cultivate a culturally competitive industry. It's similar to how, in the past, the government provided substantial subsidies to domestic electric vehicle manufacturers to support the development of electric vehicles. Ultimately, it failed to promote industrial upgrades and was exploited by local car manufacturers for subsidies. Eventually, the government learned from this and introduced a leading electric vehicle company into the market. Domestic car manufacturers were alarmed by this move. Ultimately, those who relied on deceitful subsidies were eliminated, leading to the emergence of genuinely competitive domestic electric vehicle companies. Liu Lang's suggestion regarding the acquisition for upgrading the film industry mirrors many aspects of the development of domestic electric vehicle companies. It sounds feasible, but how did you come up with so many ideas? It feels like you had this planned out long ago. You wouldn't have been plotting this in advance, would you? Shirley looked at Liu Lang with suspicion. Come on, you're making it sound uninteresting. My heartfelt patriotism and considerations for the country. Your words really chill me. Liu Lang exclaimed. Don't forget, my main job is as a director. It's my duty to contribute ideas for the development of the film industry. Hearing Liu Lang's righteous words, Shirley couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Stop it. We've known each other long enough. Okay, I admit that acquiring the foreign film industry would indeed help with my next movie production. Liu Lang shrugged. Although Shirley is clueless about high-tech fields, like a caveman, he often becomes quite clever when discussing topics within his understanding. Liu Lang's proposals regarding the acquisition of the foreign film industry were soon reported to the relevant authorities. The authorities also attach great importance to the upgrade of the cultural industry. One cannot deny that the formidable cultural infiltration power of foreign industries makes the authorities quite envious. In the context of great power competition, military conflict is the most primitive means, while competition in the cultural domain has become increasingly important in today's internet-driven era. The influence of a certain country's film industry is undoubtedly dominant in the global cinema landscape. Harnessing this power for cultural promotion will undoubtedly lead to a qualitative leap for the cultural outreach of another nation. Regarding the medical bed incident, the protection fee imposed on the domestic pharmaceutical industry has seen the first tranche of $500 billion allocated by the Strategic Authority to subsidize the transformation of the domestic pharmaceutical sector. The remaining special funds exceeding $500 billion are considered an unexpected fortune for the Strategic Authority, which can enhance the strength of the domestic cultural industry and improve the international competitiveness of cultural exports. Additionally, this could be a favorable deal for Liu Lang. As for Liu Lang's proposal to acquire the film industry of that country, one might wonder if it stems from his hobby of filmmaking. To be frank, the Strategic Authority does not care at all, given Liu Lang's current contributions and his importance to the country's official stance. Is it excessive for him to want to make a movie? Not at all. Even if he wanted to make 10 films, the Strategic Authority wouldn't bat an eye. They would even provide various supportive measures. Funding would be exclusively available, with no limits. If he needed big-name actors for filming, the head of the Security Bureau would personally extend invitations. Extra actors could come from active-duty military personnel, and various military equipment would be on standby. For film reviews, Shirley would ensure that the broadcasting and television department would grant approval without any cuts. Thus, the proposal to acquire the film industry, including major film companies and cinema chains, as well as large filming bases, was quickly communicated through official channels to the top leadership. Regarding the allocation of the special funds exceeding $500 billion, the top leadership naturally hoped that all funds would be invested in bonds and the fund market of that country. This, however, was clearly unrealistic, as the citizens are not naive. Ultimately, choosing the film industry came as a surprise to the top leadership, but it was not unacceptable. Soon, Shirley informed Liu Lang that the acquisition process for the film industry had begun. However, I still couldn't understand why he specifically requested the film rights inventory of several major companies. Would his new film require their copyrights? Seeing Shirley's puzzled expression, Liu Lang smiled and replied, "Exactly." Chapter 373, Ready Player One. It has been nearly half a year since Liu Lang's last film, Elysium, was released. During this time, the crew members spent nearly 3 months on a global promotional roadshow. As the film's director, producer, and investor, Liu Lang, although not directly involved in this extensive and time-consuming promotional effort, did not remain idle. The 6th-generation fighter jet, the Black Antelope aerospace fighter, individual electromagnetic cannons, police robots, and the recent MP-3000 medical bed were all on his agenda. The military-industrial equipment and life sciences technology, with high levels of confidentiality, carry significant meaning and value. Therefore, to the outside world, it may seem like director Liu Lang has been slacking off for half a year after completing Paradise Space, but in reality, he is no less busy than those members of the global roadshow teams. Only Liu Lang truly understands these advanced military technology products. Without his high-level planning and coordination, it wouldn't matter if there were complete design blueprints. It might take 10 years to achieve so many advanced technological results. So, is this a case of working hard for half a year and then rewarding oneself with a movie? Shirley couldn't figure out why Liu Lang was so keen on making films. If he had Liu Lang's intellect, he would undoubtedly throw himself wholeheartedly into scientific research. Securing a position as an esteemed academic would surely be more rewarding than being a director. Although well-known directors like Zhang, Chun, and Feng enjoy immense fame in the domestic film industry, in the eyes of the Security Bureau supervisor Shirley, their combined value pales in comparison to that of an esteemed academic. Esteemed academics can produce research results that genuinely enhance national strength. In contrast, those so-called famous directors, their films struggle to even reach beyond the country's borders, and aside from a few award-winning art films, their real international influence is negligible. Brother Lei, please don't assume my profession based on some trivial technological achievements. My true identity is that of a science fiction film director, recognized by the state. Concepts like Black Antelope, electromagnetic cannons, military police robots, and sky cities are merely inspirations that pop up while making movies. Without films, they would have no chance of appearing in this world. Liu Lang responded earnestly, convinced that he wasn't lying at all. However, after hearing this, Shirley could hardly contain his disbelief. Was he really being so pretentious? If the young researchers at the esteemed academy heard this, they might feel utterly disheartened. Could one just casually create a nuclear fusion reactor or a space elevator? Such remarks could only be made in front of me. If others heard them, they would surely hold a grudge. Liu Lang shrugged. If they want to think of me that way, there's nothing I can do about it. Perhaps finding a hobby could even benefit their primary research work. Shirley chose not to engage further with Liu Lang's pretentious remarks, and after conveying the message, he resumed his efforts to oversee the acquisition of domestic film industry operations. Although Hollywood does not encompass the entirety of the film industry, it is undoubtedly the most representative part. Among the hundreds of film production companies in Hollywood, the most dominant are 6 major companies: Warner Brothers, Paramount Pictures, 20th Century Fox, Sony Columbia Pictures, Disney, and Universal Pictures. They have a world-class commercial film production team, leading industrial film production technologies, the best filmmakers from around the globe, and countless popular film and television copyrights. What Lu Lang values the most are the numerous globally renowned IPs under the 6 major film giants: Marvel Universe, Star Wars, Disney Animation, Pirates of the Caribbean, X-Men, Alien, Toy Story, Harry Potter, The Lord of the Rings, The Matrix, DC Universe, King Kong, Godzilla, Jurassic World, Transformers, Spider-Man, Men in Black, 007, Mission Impossible. Each of these film IP series has been a commercial blockbuster worldwide, with over $500 billion in dedicated funding, along with the cooperation of relevant authorities. The ownership of these IP copyrights will shift to the country in question, not only the 6 major film giants, but also some medium and small-sized Hollywood companies with valuable copyrights are included in this acquisition. For instance, Lionsgate, which owns high-value IPs like The Hunger Games, Twilight, Saw, Now You See Me, and The Expendables, has a market value of only about $3 billion. Even with a premium acquisition, it would only take less than $4 billion for a full acquisition. Compared to the dedicated acquisition funds exceeding $500 billion, $3 to $4 billion is practically a bargain. Among so many film companies, there are naturally some that are unwilling to sell. Faced with a premium acquisition that averages 10 times their market value, some still refuse to part with their assets. In such cases, intervention from relevant authorities is required. The application agreement for the dedicated funds clearly states that the authorities have the obligation to assist in the acquisition of domestic targets. Considering that the country also controls the disclosure of the progress of medical bed proliferation, a crucial factor that could determine the fate of the pharmaceutical industry, the higher-ups are left with no choice but to order official forces to assist in a forced acquisition of these film companies. The domestic film industry's contribution to GDP is merely a few percentage points compared to the pillar pharmaceutical industry, making it an easy target for sacrifice. Not only film production companies, but a portion of the over $500 billion dedicated funds is also used to acquire the top 3 cinema chains in North America, as well as various well-known and lesser-known film shooting bases. The combined box office of the 3 major cinema chains accounts for about 70% of the annual box office in the region. Thus, through this more than $500 billion dedicated fund, the country has completely mastered the entire closed-loop process of Hollywood film shooting, production, distribution, and screening. This acquisition is unprecedented in the global film industry. Even with the cooperation of relevant authorities, it would take at least 2 to 3 months to finalize. During the waiting period, Lu Lang kept busy and reached out to the assistant director Lin Hao, who was still on vacation. "Hey, Hao, we've got a project. A new movie is about to start filming." "Wow, Lang, you actually remembered me, bro. What is the new movie called?" "Ready Player One."